tapes have confused me. There are more monsters now, and what the hell was Godzilla doing at the end of that tape? I took time to think like before, but I need more answers. I looked through the box again where I found the tapes. I was looking to see if there's another one in there, but instead I found a note from my dad. This is the note. I went to his house. I needed answers. I went late at night around 10. I parked 5 houses down the road and I made my way to his house. I went around the back and found a key under a plant pot. I went inside and began looking for the tapes. The note didn't tell me where to look. I figured they would most likely be in my dad's office. I went upstairs, and I did find them in a small box. I heard a car pull up in the driveway and I heard people unlocking the front door. I could at least make out 2 different voices, and they were talking about finding the tapes. It was only a matter of time before they came upstairs, so I opened the window in the office. I began to climb out of it slowly, and I went down the side of the house. But I ended up dropping the box. When I got down, I quickly grabbed the box and ran back to my car. The men inside the house must have not heard me, because they didn't follow me. I got back in my car and headed back to my house. I kept checking to see if I was being followed, but I wasn't, thankfully. When I got home, I assessed the situation. I would have to fix some of the tapes because when I dropped the box, I damaged a few. But in the meantime, I decided to watch the tapes I didn't damage. I now noticed that each tape had a year written on the side. The first 2 I watched were labeled 1945 and 1946, and 1954. The first tape I decided to put in was labeled 1954 to 1961. This is the tape.
Project G-Buster, now known as the Jet Jaguar Initiative, was a U.S. military project created for the purpose of fighting giant monsters. The project was proposed shortly after the 1954 incident now labeled Damn or Destroy All Monsters. It was made in fear of Godzilla awakening from his hibernation. The project proposed to create a giant robot to combat Godzilla. The final design resembles that of a giant human being with a pointed head. 2 of these robots were made. This was because of Godzilla's combat effectiveness in one-on-one fights seen in the Dam incident. The twin Jaguars were capable of flying at Mach 7, but when it came to fighting, hand-to-hand combat was used. The lack of missiles or other projectiles was to save on fuel used for the robots. Their fuel could last a full 24 hours before deactivating. Construction began in 1954 and finished in 1959. After the Dam incident, the remains of the monsters were studied. Construction of a laboratory began at Niihau Island to study the Angurius corpse. Another laboratory was constructed in Alaska to study the Godzilla cocoon and Gigan's corpse. Construction of both labs started in April of 1954 and ended in August of 1954. However, the Barragan corpse caused issues. Barragan and Godzilla fought on the Big Diomede Island, which was owned by Russia. The US government quickly removed the Barragan corpse to Niihau laboratory before the Russians could notice. This was done shortly after the Dam incident. The US government did not want the Russians finding out about the monsters. However, it had seemed that the Russians had already known about the monsters. Americans, part of the CIA, reported that in October of 1954, the Russians were planning to build a laboratory at Vagik Island. In January of 1955, construction began and finished in August of 1956. The laboratory was built very similarly to the lab in Bikini Atoll. Shortly after construction finished, a Russian expedition was sent out into the Amazon rainforest. During the expedition, 3 animals were captured and brought back to the lab at Vagic Island. Greater bulldog bat, Noctilio leporinus, green anaconda, Eunectes murinus, Chocone bushmaster, Lachesis acrocorda.
Unlike the Americans' mutations, subject G001 is mutating slowly, possibly due to G001 being made from 3 different organisms. Each creature has fully fused to the other. The bat's legs have centered themselves at the base of the mutation. The tails on both snakes have moved to the back and are parallel with each other. The bat's wings have been centered on the back of the mutation. The Bushmaster's head and neck is on the far right of the mutation. The green anaconda's head and neck is on the middle of the mutation. The bat's head and neck is on the far left of the mutation. The bat's neck has enlarged. Mutation's limbs have become proportional to the rest of the body. Golden scales are forming across the body. Spikes are beginning to form on the backs of each animal's head and on the ends of their tails. Mutation's overall size has increased dramatically. Size is near the current reported size of another mutation named Godzilla. Each of the mutation's skulls have greatly changed. Golden scales now almost cover the entire monster. Electricity behaves strangely around the mutation. Mutation seems to have finished changing. It is continuing to grow in size.
What you are about to watch is military drone footage captured shortly after Ghidorah's escape. Viewer discretion is advised. After Ghidorah's escape, the Alaskan lab reported seismic activity. However, it wasn't an earthquake. Godzilla had awakened. It seemed he sensed the presence of Ghidorah. After emerging from his cocoon, changes were observed on Godzilla. Godzilla's movement suggested he was heading straight for Ghidorah. Through the CIA, the Americans learned of Ghidorah's escape. The twin jet Jaguar were mobilized. One would face Godzilla and the other would face Ghidorah. The main goal was not to kill, but to lure both monsters to the giant Novaya Zemlya island. What you are about to watch is military drone footage captured shortly after the twin jet Jaguars were deployed. Viewer discretion is advised. The explosion was covered up as a test. The American government and Russian government never spoke of what happened. Only one of the twin jet Jaguars survived the fight, and it was heavily damaged. The Tsar bomber dropped on Godzilla and Ghidorah seemingly killed them both. 2 years later, in 1963, the United States and Soviet Union would sign the Partial Test Ban Treaty. It prohibited nuclear tests in the atmosphere, outer space, and underwater. While not directly addressed in the treaty, it would prevent the creation of more giant monsters.